Welcome to REWORK, a podcast by 37 Signals about the better way to work and run your business. I'm your host, Kimberly Rhodes, and I'm joined by the co-founders of 37 Signals, Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson. I think it goes without saying that Jason and David are great public speakers. And this week, I wanted to chat a little bit about that, some of their techniques and processes they use, especially we have some conferences coming up. David, I know you're speaking at Rails World. I've seen a lot of check-ins from our colleagues saying they're working on their Rails World talks as well. So I thought this was good timing to kind of dive into it. Before we get started, I read a statistic that 75% of people in the world have public speaking as one of their fears. So I'm curious, have you guys always been comfortable speaking publicly?
The first public talk I ever gave, I was terrified. My knees were shaking, my hands were shaking. It was like a 3 or 4 person. Actually, we were for those of you who are really old, we used to do this thing called Enormicom, which was like this fake website where we were like a fake branding agency that made fake logos and fake names and fake taglines. And we were asked to present as Enormicom at this conference. It was me, Ernest, and Matt, way back in the day. And it was like a skit. It was like everything I'm bad at. It was like first speaking gig and like a skit. And it was just, it worked out okay, I guess. I don't know. But I was fucking terrified. Since then, though, I've been fine. But you know what it was? And I would say that it was the first time, but there's something deeper in it. I wasn't confident in what I was doing. I didn't like this idea of doing a skit. I thought the whole thing was kind of stupid. And at least for me, when I go into it feeling like I don't believe in the material or whatever, it's a lot harder. When you go into something knowing that you know what the hell you're talking about, it's a lot easier for me. And I think one of the reasons people have a hard time with public speaking is they end up having to say things they don't really know, they don't really believe in. They're asked to give a talk about something and they're not really that well versed in the topic, or they sort of kind of are, but don't really believe what they're saying. They're speaking on behalf of a company and having to present talking points. I think all that makes it really uncomfortable in a way that they wouldn't have a hard time if they were talking about their dog at home, like who they know and love and have had for 9 years. Like, I think there's a lot to it, even though it's still people get nervous about getting up on stage. I think there's something deeper, and it's that degree of material, like understanding the material and really feeling the material. That's where you can find a lot of confidence.
David, what about you?
It's interesting because it's almost like a weird paradox. My favorite form of public speaking is when I walk in cold, have not discussed the topics at all with who I'm speaking with, and don't know what the fuck I'm going to say.
Agreed.
Like, that is my ideal, just sort of free form, freestyle riffing. Because in fact, I often end up coming up with really, to me at least, interesting ideas or interesting takes or interesting ways to say the material that Jason says that I wouldn't have developed otherwise. And I have a far greater problem with material I've really prepared. That's actually when I get nervous. When I've spent a long time coming up with a complete talk, like I gave one at RailsConf, I don't know, 4 years ago, where I wrote out the whole damn thing, 55 minutes worth of material on this one abstract theme of comparing a capitalist versus communist way of approaching open source software. And you know what? A lot of it was thoughts I'd had, and I could have been comfortable talking about those thoughts in a looser context. But when I had to present it as this final thing, I did get a little nervous. So it's really interesting, this idea that almost jumping without a safety rope feels more natural. I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but it has certainly arrived at that point that that's the only kind of talk outside of a few very select opportunities that I do any other way. I only do the fireside chat, which is basically, let me just riff on something where I know the material, as Jason says. We're always talking about the same thing. I mean, there's some of that confidence that just comes from, all right, do you know what? We're going to be talking about topics I've literally sunk thousands of hours into. So as Jason says, I'm familiar with the material. You're going to ask me about entrepreneurship or how to learn a new skill. I mean, I could do it blindfolded. So that's sort of nice. But the reason I am still interested in doing that is exactly because I'm not repeating a set of talking points that were written down. Because this was one of the things I found out very early on when Jason and I started doing public speaking together. We did this series of workshops called the Building a Base Camp. And I could do the same script twice, and if you really twisted my arms 3 times, no fucking way I'm doing it 4 times. I cannot repeat myself according to a script 4 times without boring myself brain dead. It just doesn't work like that. I need some novelty of like, I don't know if this material is going to work. I don't know if this way of presenting the material is going to work. So either I'm going to just shake the dice and it's going to come out how it's going to come out because I haven't practiced any of it. That's novel. That's potentially interesting. That could be fun. Or I got to write a new script every time. And that's where we sort of ended up with those Building a Base Camp. We do the same show like 2-3 times. And then we just like, all right, we got to take a break, or we got to reformulate it, or we got to materially update it and do it in a different way. But I also do think there is some personality to it. For me, I haven't had the same level of, it has never been like a top one fear for me to speak in front of other people. And I know there's lots of people, you just quoted that stats where that's true. And do you know where I noticed this? I noticed this with my kids. So I have 3 kids. The oldest revels in this idea of getting up on a stage with that fucking half-assed presentation or preparation of something to say. And I can just see that like he really enjoys that. And then the other 2, not so much, right? Like there's far more of a hesitancy. I got to prepare. I got to be ready. So I do think there is some DNA toggles there that either makes it easy for you or not. But history is also full of people who didn't like doing it at all and who ended up being amazing public speakers because they just had the discipline to stick with it, practice it like a skill, which it is, and get good at it. So even if you do have those DNA toggles in the way that it terrifies you, there's plenty of precedents for getting good at it.
I'll add too that I don't like to prepare for talks. The more I prepare, the less prepared I feel. And part of that is because you end up trying then to memorize and recite. And then you can like forget a line and it throws you, or you like said it wrong and now you're off your script. I prefer to totally just freewheel it. Again, I got to know the material. And I do know my material, so I'm comfortable there. But I also like when I go on podcasts or when I do interviews, they want to send me the questions ahead of time. I never, ever want them. I always delete them. I tell them I'm not going to look at them. I don't want to know what people are going to ask me. I don't want to have thought about what they're going to ask me. It's just not, I don't think I perform as well when that's the case. Because then I'm just reciting this thing. I'm remembering what I want to say versus what do I really want to say now? What am I feeling right now? So I'm with David on that completely.
I was actually going to ask you about that, about Q&As and how you prepare, if you do it all.
I hate knowing. It's like when you have a conversation with someone, they don't tell you what you're like. Let's say you go out with a friend. They don't like send you the questions you're going to talk about at a coffee.
Here's the agenda for our coffee date.
Yeah, you just talk to a human being. That's what I want to do. I want to talk to somebody. They can prepare their questions if they want to do that. That's their style, their method. That's fine. But I don't want to know them. I don't want to know them. And people are always surprised, like, wow, you don't want to know. No, I don't. I don't want to know them. And they like, they're shocked. I guess most people do want to know what they're being asked because they don't want to go off script or say the wrong thing, or they don't want to look like an idiot. I don't really care about any of those things. So yeah, everyone is different for sure in that respect.
Well, David, what about when you have a keynote? I know you have Rails World coming up. I'm assuming you have to do more than just wing it if you're putting together a slide deck and that sort of thing. Like how much preparation are you putting into something like that?
It depends on whether I'm trying to develop a novel, abstract concept, an argument, an essay in spoken form. I've done that several times. And you know what? Nothing reminds me more of school and homework than that. It reminds me of though like I'm prepping for a fucking exam. And I remember thinking when I was in school, I can't wait to be done with this shit. I can't wait not to have homework anymore. I can't wait not to have exams anymore. Now, lots of what we do, you could consider homework. We're doing all this prep. We're making a product. That's a kind of homework. No, it's not. I'm not doing it in this shape for someone else to judge in this immediacy way. So I actually hate it. And this is why I don't do it anymore, really. I mean, the Rails conferences, like one time a year, I go like, do you know what? There's a very good odd that I'm going to be cursing my commitment to appearing at this conference by the time I'm like 1 week into my preparation. And I go like, why? Why did I sign up for this? But this year it's a little different. And last year was also a little different because there was just so much concrete material to talk about. Like this year, there's like 5 new frameworks and libraries and up the wazoo. So I can talk about a lot of concrete things. I'm not making some broad abstract theses that I'm presenting and trying to defend. So that's not so bad. But like Jason, this idea that you show up cold and why that works, I liken it to songwriting and recording. So I fell in love with this Fleetwood Mac song called Dreams about 2 or 3 years ago. And like, I think it was some TikTok on a guy on a skateboard
cranberry
drinking grape juice, like just like really a vibe, as they would say, right? And it's just like, I got that the song would not leave my damn head for 3 weeks. I probably listened to it, I don't know, 200 times. I still like it. And then I looked into the origins of that song and especially the original cut. And you know what? At least the story I've read, I mean, rock and roll history, there's about 500 different stories and who the hell know which one is true. But that the cut that made it was the original one. It was the first one. It was when they just sat down and they tried for 3 days, I think, afterwards to recreate that with more preparation. Now we know all the chords. They couldn't hit it. They couldn't beat it. The original take was the best take. And I think there's something very true about that level of art, that art requires a nerve. It requires some novelty. It requires just some spur of the moment lightning strike to really be right. And I mean, that's I mean, we're talking about Dreams here, one of the all-time greatest songs. I'm not comparing any of our shit we say on stage to any of that. But there's some of that in it, that quality that it usually comes off most authentic, most inspiring, most invigorating when it is fresh and when it just rolls off. And this was something I tried for a while to beat around. I thought, you know what? I really don't like this half preparation step. So I'll just do the full prep thing. And I had 2 keynotes where I wrote out the whole thing. I literally read the keynotes. And I liked the certainty of the material. Then I was sure what I was going to present, but I hated how it came out. Like even the words sound different. When I can't read from a script the same way I can speak to you. You need to be a very good actor or actress to be able to do that, I think, to memorize a set of lines and then deliver those lines authentically. This is why most people are not good actors at all. And it's when they're trying to recite something and pretend something. A lot of people, like Jason would say, they can talk that way persuasively about their dog or some other topic that is just off the cuff and it feels natural. And most people would much rather listen to that. They don't want to listen to a script. Anytime you feel like you can sense or smell the script, you can smell the talking points, you go like, do you know what that smells like? It smells like bullshit.
Okay, my question for you is, are there things that you've taken as an audience member, meaning you've watched someone else speak and you've been like, that is something good. I want to take that and reuse it. Are there any tips like that where you might be able to share things that you've seen work really well, or also on the other side, things that don't work well?
I mean, I'll just say one of the best public speakers I've ever seen is Gary Vaynerchuk. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why is because he just is himself.
Yeah.
He is so much, and I know him personally, so I know like he is the guy on stage. But even if I didn't know him, I would go, yeah, this guy is exactly who he is. He just is himself. How he dresses, he doesn't put on airs. He just is. And I think every time I've ever seen someone who's like that, it's better than anything compared to people who have to play a role unless they're extremely good actors, or like David is saying, but most people are not. Like I was at a conference recently and there was like someone up on stage who was an attorney for some company talking about like some new tax implication thing. And like, she didn't want to be there. Clearly she wasn't a good public speaker. Clearly it was like, she was acting, maybe she was very corporate, but I actually met her afterwards because I was a speaker too. And so we hung out in the lounge for a minute. she was a lot looser. And then she went up on stage and she was not that. And she was trying to play the lawyer role, like maybe her boss was in the audience. Like, the closer you can just simply be who you are and be very comfortable with that, regardless of how good or how bad you are, the better off you're going to come off. People then will empathize with you or cheer for you or feel for you if you're just who you are. The further away you are from that, the harder I think it is for everybody, unless you're, again, an extraordinary actor who's literally like a legitimate actor who could perform on stage, like, at Broadway or something like that, where they can really pull off a character. If you're trying to play a character and you're not a character actor, you're in trouble.
One thing this reminds me of, and I don't know anything about jazz, so maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but this idea that very good jazz musicians, they can improvise, and they're very good at that. But that improvisation is born from high technical skills. They know the material, as Jason would say, they know their instrument, so they're comfortable getting up and just riffing with another band, and that's a big part of the magic of that form of music. My illustration of that's most vivid is also a Gary Vee story. We invited Gary Vee to talk at a Rails Conf, I think in the mid 2010s or something. And I remember talking to Gary before, and I was like, "So what are you going to talk about?" It's like, "I don't know." And it was like, "What do you mean? Like, you're going on stage in 5 minutes?" And he was like, "Do you know what? When I get out there, I'll think of something." And he walks out there and literally just raises the roof, right? Like, just an absolutely mind-blowing performance. And you go like, that's a jazz musician at his highest level of skill. He's like, I'm just going to go out there and jam. I have the things in my fingers and I can jam it. And it's amazing to look at that. So I very often, I have a Gary Vee image in my head when I try to do these fireside jokes. Like, I don't know what I'm going to say. Like, let's hope it comes out well. I know my instrument, like where I'm going to play something. On the other end of the spectrum, well, I don't even know if it's on the end of the spectrum. Another character who's very un-Gary Vee-like in their public persona, but I have been absolutely blown away, is Jim Rohn. And Jim Rohn was a public speaker for, I think, about 40 years. He was a mentor to Tony Robbins and a bunch of these other people you would think of today. When you think of public speaking, you think about someone like Tony Robbins. Well, Jim Rohn was sort of the original. And I found him through TikTok. And I got some of those clips from seminars he gave in the 80s and the 90s. And what's so amazing about it, like, the quality is really poor and they zoom over to the audience and everyone is wearing like puffy shoulders. And all of that just fades away because I have never listened to anyone deliver life advice, business advice with that cadence and rhythm and precision and control of their pace. And I listen to Jim, and I'll listen to the same clips over and over again because not only is the material great, I can totally relate to the things that he's talking about, but I can also just listen to a master at work. And I don't have to hear the words to hear how he speeds up, slows down, repeats, emphasizes, is animated with his hands, leans on the podium. And you just go like, this is incredible. I didn't even know all of these little micro movements mattered that much, but you see them performed like by someone like Jim Rohn, and you just go like, this is incredible. In fact, after watching him talk, I always go, do you know what? I talk too fast. I should talk more like Jim Rohn. I should pause when I really want to emphasize something. Now, that's not my natural style. So, in fact, even though I'd like to do it, I can't do it. Because now I'd be playing Jim Rohn, and I'd be a bad imitation of Jim Rohn. I got to be me. And I talk pretty fast. I want to get a maximum amount of material out. So it doesn't work to do that. But to see someone in their element, it's incredible. And I think that's actually perhaps one of the reasons why some people do fear it, because it feels like we can all do it to some extent. Like, you can get up on the stage and you can talk, but there's still quite a difference between that and then delivering a Jim Rohn. So I don't know if that's part of it, but anyway.
I also think part of the fear is like you're so vulnerable. Like when you're up on stage, it is just you in front of people staring at you. I think there's a vulnerability to it as well.
I mean, a lot of people are afraid of being humiliated. And there is some sense of humiliation if you're standing up there in front of 1,000 people and you suddenly lose your train of thought and you can't catch it again. And now you're going, guh, 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 right? No one wants to do that. So I totally get where that's coming from. I'm sure that has a straight evolutionary line to being ostracized from the cave because you're an idiot and no one wants to sit around the fireplace with you. So that makes sense. But I will also say, I mean, you can work up through these things. And I've watched in the technical community people who start out being quite bad at it, and they start at a small venue and then they work their way up, and you see them like a couple of years later and you go like, hot damn, how did that happen? Well, it happened through practice. I think a great example or parallel of this is watch famous comedians. If you can find some of their early clips and you go like, are you kidding me? This is what they used to sound like? I would have walked out on Louis C.K. Episode of whatever he was doing. I mean, maybe he was always great, but I've seen those evolutions, and I think actually stand-up comedy has a lot of parallels to this kind of. You have some material, you know the material, but you also got to improvise. You got to adjust your pacing to the audience. You got to focus things and so forth. So, in either way, I think it's a fun skill to learn. It's a fun thing to get better at, and you absolutely will get better at it if you do it more. And I think maybe this is one of the areas where the fact that there's about 5 billion gazillion podcasts is actually helping level people up in this way so that they can use some of those speaking skills in person and get that acceleration. Because it is also that. You stand up in front of hundreds of people, even dozens of people, and you deliver something that they like that's a rush. You can see how rock stars get addicted to playing stadiums in front of 50,000 people. It is a rush. And the rush is directly comparable to the fact that you're also afraid of it. If there was nothing, you're probably not going to get the same rush.
I love that. Well, thank you for that. With that, we're going to wrap it up. REWORK is a production of 37 Signals. You can find show notes and transcripts on our website at 37signals.com/podcast. Full video episodes are on YouTube and Twitter. And if you have a question for Jason or David about a better way to work and run your business, leave us a voicemail at 708-628-7850. You can also text that number or email us at rework@37signals.com.